Hello, you all. This is a video request that someone wanted me to upload on my thoughts about American Signal Corporation. Now, what I'm going to try to cover on this one is I'm going to do American Signal Corporation, Alerting Communicators of America, and Biersock and Niedermeyer. As they were all specifically sirens, just like how I did on my Federal Signal one. So I'm going to kind of sort of do... This one I'm going to do is going to be probably slightly different because... so here's how it's going to go. For my thoughts of American Signal, at first, I think they're a pretty good company. They could be better, okay? Now, what I'd like to say first is I've never contacted or emailed American Signal Corporation before. The only ones I've actually really contacted was Federal Signal and Wheelan. Never American Signal Corporation. The only one I have contacted, though, would be James Biersock himself. Which, of course, you know, he was president of Alerting Communicators of America. I'm not sure how he's doing today. You know, he's... I haven't heard from him recently. But anyways, what I want to say is... because I don't really contact American Signal Corporation, I mainly got a lot of this information off the internet or one of my other siren enthusiast friends. But what I'd like to say about my thoughts about American Signal is... I think they're doing the right thing, specifically, like on how they design their sirens, for the most part. They made it so that because they're fiberglass, it prevents the possibility of rust or corrosion on their sirens, because Federal Signal, on the other hand, most of them, as I can think of, are made of steel. And because of that, they have a tendency to rust or stuff like that, even though they're heavier than fiberglass. But fiberglass, for the most part, you know, they don't have that, like, kind of problem where they seem to handle such rough conditions and such like that. So, American Signal, I think they made the right step on that. Originally, when Biersock and Niedermeyer... when they only had the one siren, which was the Mobile Directo, both the gasoline-powered and the electric-powered one, of course, were not fiberglass. They were metal or steel or whatever. But anyways, what I like to say for American Signal, there are some certain issues that that I feel is kind of questionable, and that I'm not exactly too sure about. One of them is there's already a video discussing about this, but there's one where there was like a debate between the Super Banshee and the Soundmaster 115. James Biersock stated that James Morgan, the founder of Soundmaster, or the guy who created Soundmaster, as you may have said, he didn't pay for the rotors or basically he took the rotor design from Alerting Communicators of America, or what I should say is that Alerting Communicators of America perhaps may have spread false rumors or not truthful information to its competitors, because from what I heard, Alerting Communicators of America back then were desperate to selling sirens, which it's understandable. But I think Alerting Communicators of America, or even American Signal, you know, the fact that, like, if there's, like, some information that they try to give out that's actually not necessarily true, or they try to talk, you know, about bad stuff about other siren manufacturers and such like that may not necessarily be the case. The way I see it, I personally think they should do a better job on being able to handle that. But what I like to say specifically is that Alerting Communicators of America, they did also advertise saying that the cyclone siren is the loudest non-directional siren in the world. Well, maybe back in its time it was. I'm not sure when the Sentry 40V2T was introduced, but anyways, the Sentry also claims that their siren is 130 decibels at 100 feet, while the Cyclone is only 125, which is true, but James Biersock, I'm not going to criticize him, but they claim that Sentry lied about their 40V2T being 130 decibels measured at 100 feet. Well, they're going to claim otherwise, because I don't know anything. I never contacted Sentry either, so I don't know anything about them, much of them, but what I think about American Signal is they just want to be the top competitor, just like Federal Signal. I don't know much about Federal Signal on their history, on like how American Signal does, but American Signal seems to have their kind of ways of thinking is rather, what I say, questionable. Because one I like to say is that here's one that I don't like. This is what really bothers me the most. There's a specific siren that American Signal manufactures that's called the T135DC, which is basically, it looks very identical to a T128, but it looks a little different. It's got a bigger projector, and it's just a larger kind of design. And, you know, the pros of that siren is that compared to the previous model, which we called Penetrator 50 horsepower, or P50 for short, is that instead of using 50 horsepower, the T135 DC, I believe, only uses 7.5 horsepower, if I'm correct, and at the same time is battery backup. And because it doesn't need as much parts needed to maintain, it should be a winner. But as it turned out, we found out that the T135 DC apparently is not as loud as the Penetrator 50 horsepower siren. But why? Why is that? Well, I actually did ask one of my siren friends, and again, I don't want to have to do this, but I'd rather keep the name confidential. Not that, you know, he's done anything wrong, but just to protect, you know, the privacy reasons. I'm only just going to read off what he told me, but I basically asked him, why is it that the new T135 is not 130 decibels, or 135 decibels measured at 100 feet like advertised? What he replied saying was that ASC got lazy when developing the T135 and knew they couldn't match the old P50 siren. And then I said, would you happen to have an idea of what makes the siren not reach 135? And then he stated that the rotor is all wrong. It doesn't push enough air and it sounds too flat. The better sirens have a really strong voice like the Red Arrow or even the Cyclone. Now, what he meant by that was that those two are dual-tone sirens, but he is actually right. The Cyclone and the Red Arrows, because of their proper design, or should I say mostly because of their proper design, they can carry, I feel like they can pack a punch really well, and they're efficient, they're effective. I never heard both of those sirens at all in person, so I couldn't possibly know, but I believe in it. And I also said that I also asked what do you think it would take to fix the problem? He answered saying is to redesign the whole siren, which American Signal is not going to do. They're not going to redesign the T135 because, you know, what I believe they did was they rushed the product of the T135 that they claim, but technically many of us think that it's about 132 decibels measured at 100 feet than 135. So, and I asked him, like, saying, do you think the intakes would have to be bigger? And he said that, everything would have to be changed. Better rotor, better air intake, horns, every single piece. There is no way the current T135 AC/DC can really be improved. It's just a crappy design. So that's what he told me. But technically he's right. I mean, the thing is, what bothers me about American Signal is that, again, Federal Signal could be like this too, is that when you lie to your potential customers about siren facts, that's poor customer servicemanship, at least in my point of view. Okay, in my point of view, I think it's just wrong to lie to your customers like that, because even though I understand they wanted to have a replacement for a Penetrator 50 horsepower siren, but the fact that they didn't design it properly is just so... The fact that they didn't design it correctly to make it just as loud as the P50, or maybe even louder as it should have been in the first place, is just really disappointing. So, my thoughts on that is, I'm just not happy about it. I'm not really satisfied on whether if American Signal Corporation is really telling the truth or not on certain aspects. But anyways, above all that, though, American Signal, they're not a bad company. As far as being trustworthy, maybe not. I'm not exactly darn sure, but American Signal, I like their sirens mostly. I really actually love their sirens. They have great sirens. There's no doubt about it. But I know they can do a better job on improving them and not just, doing it in a rush or just to make it quick and just to get it done and over with. I really wish they would actually take the time to properly manufacture sirens the way they should be. Because another thing is that the Cyclone, for example, it is true that the Cyclone is the loudest omnidirectional siren that American Signal has ever produced or manufactured, but they don't make those anymore. Now the loudest omnidirectional was probably the T121, which is about 121 decibels measured at 100 feet, or so they say, which could be true. I never heard one in person, so I wouldn't know. I've heard an Eclipse 8 before, which it sounded pretty loud, but, it wasn't one of the loudest sirens I've been to. But the Eclipse 8, which of course is not American Signal, it's Federal Signal, the Eclipse 8 still, I believe, packed a pretty good punch. So, because of the low tone and the fact that it's omnidirectional, it just, it just feels, you just kind of sort of feel that sound. It just kind of feels slightly strong. Well, the T121 should be better than the Eclipse 8. And I believe it is, for the most part. I don't really have any other kind of information about the... for the T121 and the T128, I think those sirens are manufactured correctly. But the T135, the DC version, is not. It could have been better. It should have been better. I know it could have been better. But American Signal, they just, they felt confident enough in their design. Now, unfortunately, it still is the loudest siren that's currently being made today. But, the fact that it's not louder than the Penetrator 50 siren, it just, it's so disappointing, And the P50 was a really good design. I mean, it required a lot of horsepower to operate, and it was a big, bulky siren, but it was fiberglass. I believe, for the horn, for the most part. So, the P50, the P50 shouldn't be, would not, it couldn't have been more complicated than a Thunderbolt. Okay, a Federal Signal Thunderbolt, that requires a lot of parts compared to the P50. But the P50, it was a large siren that it required, again, a minimum of 50 horsepower, which is quite a lot. Sirens nowadays, some sirens like, like, here's another thing. Because P50s don't have battery backup and they don't have that capability, you just can't, that's why, they had to replace them with battery backup sirens. But the new T135 just disappoints me on how American Signal just doesn't, it just bothers me that, they should have put a better effort into it. So that's what I want to say for that. But to kind of get into the positives about American Signal, they at least tried to make their sirens, the best, or one of the best, should I say. Sometimes that was right, sometimes it wasn't. It depended on which customer wanted it and what it was used for specifically, and such like that. So American Signal, it's a good company. As far as it being the best siren manufacturer, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends on, what siren you're using. Like, I'll give you one example. If you're going to use, an electronic siren, for example, even though the iForce, the tone that it uses should be stronger than a modulator or DSA, but, it's not, this is just only my opinion. I don't like the fact that the new electronic sirens that American Signal makes, when they have the wind up is muted or muffled or very quiet, and then once it reaches its top peak, it amplifies to its full volume, whereas should just stay that way the whole duration of the wind up and even the wind down. Now, most of the American Signal electronic sirens I've seen off at YouTube, most of them don't have a wind down duration or any wind down at all. But some of them, do have it, and the ones that do, I think they sound pretty good, in my opinion. But I like Federal Signal's electronic sirens better. Theirs, I think, are a better choice than American Signal, just in my point of view. But for mechanical sirens, especially let's say an Eclipse 8 versus a T121, which one would you prefer? For me, I would probably take the T121 because it's supposed to be louder, and it's been around longer since the Eclipse 8. But the thing that's kind of bothered me is that most T121s I've heard on YouTube, it seems to me they seem to run only on DC power. I mean, they do have an AC, like a wire that goes to the controller to charge the batteries, because it's got to have a power source. But anyways, the fact that most of the T121s I've heard on YouTube use a battery backup, or they're running off of DC power, and over a period of time the pitch kind of drops slightly during the duration of the test, because it's running on DC power. Well, the Eclipse 8, of all the Eclipse 8 I've heard on YouTube, I never heard that. It usually seems to stay at a consistent, steady pitch during the whole duration of the test. Even the 508 does too. But the T128, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on what it's running on. If it's running on AC power, it should stay on continuously. If it's running on DC, it's bound to have the pitch or the speed of the rotor slow down a little bit, just a little bit, as it's going through the duration of the test. So that's the thing it's just me that I kind of personally don't really like. It's just, why not just have it run on AC? Just have it run on DC when the power's out, I mean, I don't know much about how stuff like that works or what's better for the batteries and such like that and, those kind of things. But the way I see it, sometimes I like Federal Signal better than American Signal, but sometimes I like American Signal better than Federal Signal. So in that kind of situation, it just depends on what, which one I feel like. But for me, I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards Federal Signal, because the only reason why is because there are sirens that Federal Signal produces that I like, that are one of my favorites. And American Signal, there's two sirens that I like the most. One is the Alerter, and the other one would be the T128. But I also like the Hurricane, just about almost any of the sirens, I think they're great. But the Alerters and the T128s, I think, are my personal favorites of all for American Signal, But anyways, what else do I want to say? What I want to say again about the electronic sirens is that the Federal Signal ones, they usually do have a wind up and a wind down timer setting on their Ultra Voice controllers, at least the current ones and such like that. But the American Signal ones, it doesn't seem like they have that. They might, they probably do, but I think it may have to do with how you program it and such like that. But American Signal still remains quite questionable if whether or not they're telling the truth or not. Because back then there were also rumors that Alerting Communicators of America back then were having difficulty on selling sirens. Because, Federal Signal, because they were doing so well, Alerting Communicators of America was trying to compete with them. And I believe to this day they're still competing. There also may have been some rumors saying that Alerting Communicators of America may have copied Federal Signal's rotor design on their old sirens, like the Banshee or the Alerters. Like, they may have used the same rotor design, like on the SC-10 or the 500. But I don't know if that's true. James Biersock, of course, says otherwise, that it was not. It was designed by their own patterns compared to Federal Signal's patterns. But I don't know if that's true or not, because I don't know the difference between Federal Signal's rotor patterns against American Signal's rotor pattern. I don't know if that's really true or not, because I've never seen how do you tell the difference if it was used in the same foundry or something. Or even like Soundmaster, for example. Like, did Soundmaster really take did they really take the Super Banshee and kind of just edit it as their own, like using their own shreds and not doing their breach of contract, or supposedly. But I don't know. You see, again, those two stories, it's really mixed up, it's not really clear enough to me whether or not it's true or not. Now, some of you could say in the comments section that, oh no, it is true, no it's not, but it doesn't really matter, because the point is, James Morgan is dead and James Biersock is retired. Probably, I don't know, I don't want to say this part like this, but I'm not exactly sure how much longer James Biersock is going to be around. But, if he's still alive, he's, he's, I don't want to say he's old, but, it's, it's just common when you get to that when you just get to that age. But who knows how long he'll last. But because American Signal is still in business and they're doing just fine, which is good, but they should. The fact that when you lie to your customers or don't give them the kind of information they should know, it's just, again, it's all about the money. That's what it is. Companies compete for the money. And I get it, but it's just, I just feel it's kind of stupid. It's like, I don't like it when they do that. But anyways, I like American Signal, okay? I'm hoping they would continue to try to do good. Hopefully they could do better. They've been trying to do better. For the most part, they have. But there's some, like I said, like, one of the improvements was that, especially on their rotating siren, was like, the decision of being made to having a motor-driven, chain-driven rotator to a gear-driven rotator is a big improvement. Okay, and another thing is because they used a chain-driven rotator instead of a belt-driven rotator, except on the hollower siren, they didn't seem to have much of a rotator problems like the 500 siren that Federal Signal uses, because theirs used a belt-driven rotator. So theirs was different, and those always had problems compared to Alerting Communicators of America or American Signal sirens, that use the chain-driven rotator. But even then, just because they were chain-driven, they could still have problems. But with gear-driven problems, that would be kind of hard to come by. Something could still go wrong, but usually gear-driven is better. And because the T128 was introduced before the SRMB, the 2001 SRMB came out in 2002 by Federal Signal that then used a gear-driven rotator, American Signal kind of beat them on that for being the first to develop a gear-driven rotator rotating siren. So that's a good thing. But above all that, American Signal, they're a great company, but they could do better, and I know they could. Now, you could ask them that, but they're most likely not gonna, give you the kind of information you're not looking for, just like Federal Signal. But I don't know that for sure because I never contacted American Signal, so I wouldn't know. But I don't really feel like I need to because I felt like I've got, enough information and such like that. But above all that, I think I just about covered everything I could think of. I'm not exactly too sure, but if any of you would like to share your thoughts about American Signal Corporation and such like that, I would encourage you if you would. I would love to hear it. But just, keep your comments respectful and, not annoying and such like that. But above all that, I think that's just about concludes what I can think of for now. But I just want to thank y'all for watching and have a good Christmas and a Happy New Year.